fact that we are quite unprepared and we have not really organized really shows the publishing and printing situation in Bhutan. We just had some discussions and we decided that we'll make it a conversation rather than pointed questions to each other, and we'll let our conversations flow. The three of us, of course, are groping in the dark about how to go about publishing and, experimenting and trying our own things. But we are really honored to have Meru here, who's an established, well-known, experienced publisher and who will give us some experience, share her experience and give us some guidance on how to go about. So all this is very new. I mean, leave aside publishing and printing, we came into the literary tradition only about 50 years ago, so everything is new for us. Publishing, printing was confined to the monasteries and the clergy, and now suddenly we are literate. We want to present our words and our works, and we are at a loss about how to go about it. And I am taking the responsibility of opening the discussion, not because anyone appointed me, I self-appointed myself. I guess because I'm the oldest and I have been in this arena for maybe the longest. And so I had my first experience of publishing a book already in 1996 with my folk tales. And then from there onwards, I've had different kind of experiences. And I'm still groping in the dark how to go about the next step. But in the meantime, in all these years, I think a lot of new things have evolved. And Yeshey will talk about self-publishing and how even starting up a publishing fund, you call it a publishing fund, and Passu will talk about his experience of crowd publishing, which are very interesting evolutions that have happened, because for the whole, the most important situation is that our readership is so small. So do we concentrate, the dilemma now we have talked about is, do we want to follow the conventional way of publishing, or and go and look for an international audience beyond our borders, and what kind of standards we have to keep, or do we want to publish for our own readers here and find innovative ways of how to go about? And I think both Passu and Yeshey have had very interesting experiences. And would Meru actually like to start by telling us what conventional publishing is and how do we go there?
Can you hear me? Yes. Sure, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to, first of all, to Bhutan, one of my favorite countries in the world, and also to this session to talk about publishing, which is also one of my favorite things in the world. So I feel very lucky to be here today. And you've asked me a very good question, because your question is essentially, what the hell do publishers do? Which I must tell you that there's no clear answer to that, but I'll try my best. Because to be honest, I get asked that a lot. What do you actually do? So at its very, very essence, a publisher is somebody who connects a reader to a writer. That's it. So there's somebody who writes a book, and there's somebody who wants to read that book, and a publisher does certain things in the middle. And I'll tell you what those things are. The first thing is the act of discovery. That the publisher is usually the person, except in the case of self-publishing, of course, who says, well, I really think there's something very special about this particular voice, and I think more people need to read it. And that comes out of, there's no logic to it, and that's why it works. It's like falling in love. You think that an editor looks at a manuscript and says, there's something here, I'm not sure what, I don't know if it'll lead to anything, but sometimes it does, and then there's magic. So the first thing that happens in publishing is the act of discovery, where an editor within a publishing house, and those are called commissioning editors, find an author and say, this is somebody whose talent should be, more people should read this person. After they do that, they work with the author to try and make that book the very best it can be. And that is called the editorial process. And that is a silent, but probably the most important part of, I think, of the whole publishing process. Because that is when, and it's like a partnership between somebody who is extremely talented and an editor who, when they are working at their best, it is a kind of service where you will be invisible. Nobody will ever know the work you did. And if they know the work that you did, that means you weren't a very good editor. So you have, by its very definition, you are an invisible force, and you must be okay with that if you want to be an editor. After that, after this invisible but very, very important work has been done, other people within the publishing house come into play. So there is a marketing department, there's a sales department, there is a production department, there's a design department. All of these people come together to create a cover, package the book, print the book, market the book, position it, get it into bookshops. So it's the sort of logistical part of it comes into play then. And all of these people work together to make as many people as possible know about the book and make it available. So you have to, publishing is editing, it's the editorial act, and it is also the act of making people aware that this book exists and also making it available so they can buy it. Because if you just sort of let people know the book is there and they can't buy it, then that's disappointing for both readers and writers. So it's a very finicky and there's lots of moving parts, and no one knows quite why we do it, but we do. But I can tell you that it's a very, very satisfying career. I've done it for 20 years now, and it's sometimes very frustrating, but somehow it's wonderful at the same time. Does that answer your question? All right. So I'm going to pass the mic to Yeshey. I would love to know sort of your experiences of self-publishing and, sort of how it works, because it's having a smaller market which isn't fully developed means you also have room to experiment a lot more. So I'd love to know more about that.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and to everyone who's here and who's watching us live. It's a privilege to be on this platform and be sharing about my experience. As mentioned by Kunzang and Meru, I'm very new to this literary world. I have been a lover of reading and writing ever since I was a young girl, but I was busy exploring or chasing a career of being a space engineer. So it was only recently in 2022 that I published my first book. And when I wanted to embark on this new but exciting journey, the first question that came to my mind is, how do I go about with it? I had already written a few of my poems during the lockdowns while I was thinking a lot. So I had a lot of poems in my phone, but I didn't know how to get that out to anybody else apart from my, Facebook followers or my Instagram friends, because they get a bit of my poems every once in a while on my stories, so they can check it out, like it, comment on it. But apart from that, if I want to reach a larger audience, how would I do that? So that was a very big and confusing question for me. And then I reached out to a couple of people, including Passu, who are a little bit more experienced in the literary world, in Bhutan at least. So when I started, my horizon was only within Thimphu or as far as Bhutan. So I wasn't thinking about the international market. And that's why I resolved to the idea of self-publishing. And as explained by Meru, the whole process of publishing is quite intensive, and there are a lot of moving parts, which makes it like a whole system in itself.
I have to interrupt you to say that I love it that it sounds like publishing is harder than being a space engineer.
Equally hard, if not harder. Yes. So it's a system in itself, and there are so many different parts and intricate parts to it that you have to deal with. And if you get any one of it wrong, the whole thing collapses. The whole system doesn't work. So when it comes to self-publishing, everything is toned down, or it's simpler. So whereas in a big publishing house, if you have a marketing department, here you have your friend or something like that in self-publishing. And I had my book designer and an illustrator who was also a very good friend of mine, and I really used to love her artwork through her Instagram pages and so on. So when it comes to the journey of self-publishing, everything is simpler, and that's how I wanted to start off, because you know, publishing and putting out your work itself is a very intimidating and daunting thing to think about it in the first place, and especially me coming from an engineering background and trying to jump into the literary world, it was quite, it was quite a feat. So I wanted to start off softly, and for me, self-publishing came out to be the best option. So that's how I ended up in self-publishing. And when it comes to self-publishing, the process currently that we have in Bhutan is pretty straightforward. So we have two authorities that we have to come in contact with. One is the BIGMA, Bhutan Infocom and Media Authority, where you have to get your book registered. And then you have the Center for Bhutan Studies, who gives the ISBN number for your book. And that's pretty much about it. So it's quite straightforward and simple, and that's how I was able to go about with it. However, if it's for a person who is not living in Thimphu, and maybe who doesn't have access to all these information online and so on, then maybe it can be a little bit tricky. So yes, I would like to stop here for now.
Good afternoon first. Just like Yeshey said, I thought she will put a question on me. She didn't. She just stopped it there. But anyway, it's fairly connected. She came to me when she wanted to, she came with pages of her poetry, and she had everything ready, but then she was asking what to do next. We sat for us, and we met for a few days. And I was telling her, because I also went through this journey, but when I went through that journey, we had nobody to ask to, because pioneers were like, I'm Kunzang here, but she was published by reputed publishers outside of Bhutan, and she herself did not do the designing, cover design, everything herself. So, plus she was in Pumthang, who we cannot access easily. So therefore, in our age group, we had nobody to ask about this nitty-gritties of publishing. Again, for younger people here, let me clarify this. You know, publishing and printing is confused in Bhutan. I want to publish my book, Labdala. They mean actually they want to print the book. Actually, publishing, like Meru and as she said, is this process of, you know, the whole thing, you know, when Meru described about the departments, you can see the design department, the sales department, marketing, editing, all these things together, and finally the printed book, that's publishing. But we are confused about just the printing part, which is where I was also very confused. And initially, when my friend Ngaung Pinso wanted to publish his second book, first book, he published with pilgrims in Nepal. So he didn't know what went into doing that. Second book, we tried to do it ourselves here. And he wanted me to design the cover, because among us, I was the artistic person, sort of. So he brought some art, and I put it in Microsoft PowerPoint to design the cover. It looked nice on the computer. But when it finally came out on the book, it looked so terrible. The color was dimmed, and to this day, we didn't want to look at that book cover. And the size of the book was like a textbook. We didn't like that also. And then, about the same time, 1-2 weeks up and down, we had a friend called Ugen Gelsen. His book, beautiful book, Dear Sede. It's a beautiful love story, written in a very new genre. You know, it's in the form of a letter. It's a very unique piece, but again, cover design, I'm responsible. I messed it up, you know, and the size, Ngaung messed it up. And I don't know, these two books, to this day, when you talk about this, we look at each other and then, you know, feel sorry about this. we didn't reprint it yet. We want to reprint it and do a better job. So those mistakes, fast forward about 5 years later, then I wanted to do my book. By then we have done a lot of mistakes. So then we put together a lot of young talents together. We fixed things, and then we learned about, because about that time when I messed Ngaung's and Ugen's book, if you see on Booknese bookshelf, most Booknese bookshelves, exception of Kunzang's book and Her Majesty Ajdujon's book, and there is another book, Tashu Karma Ura's book. Those were the only like 3-4 books we have ever seen for decades. Okay. Okay, in between I must also thank Bhutan Echoes for producing. Now we have like hundreds of books. For 2-3 decades, we only have about 4 Bhutanese titles, so we could only read those 4 titles. Those 4 were nice. And then there were some new authors. If you look at the book cover, design, everything was terrible. So I had to fix those. Group of us, we formed Writers Association, you know. So we tried to discuss all this, and finally we found this solution sort of a thing, you know. We appointed some as editors, some as cover designer. Then we also got a formula to calculate books MRP, then book printing negotiation skill with the printer, and some printers like Bhutan Printing Solution. They came in full on, and they knew how to design books so perfectly, like international standard. Today, if you look at, we don't know about the story, but cover, and if you keep it like this, it's like international standard. Okay, so this we figured out, but at the end, again, it comes down to something called finance. So everybody will come, so I cannot afford this, what can I do, you know? And the conventional publishing, which we would like to hear from the two, one published author and one publisher, we want to hear about the royalty and all those things. But in here, if I explain to them, okay, we'll publish your book, but you will get only 10%, they will be like, no, 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 no. Because everybody comes with a dream that they will publish a book and this will solve their life's problem. They have so many debts here, there, so I want to sell this book and make money. But they don't know that if they go to a real publisher, they will not get paid. In fact, they'll have to wait for years to get paid, or maybe never get paid, because my friend Ngaung never get paid from pilgrims in Nepal for his folktale book. Here, so they want help, plus they want money. So we were trying to find a solution. That's where this crowd publishing concept came. My friend Ngaung said, let's do this crowd publishing idea, where if I want to publish, my book is ready, everything is put into package, editing, everything's done. Now, let's look for money. So I will ask all my friends, can you chip in 10,000? Can you chip in 15,000, 50,000? But we're not begging for it. We're going to pay it back in terms of books. Catch is that. So you give me 50,000, I give you 70,000, 75,000, 50% added on this. But in terms of book, poor thing, they have to, first they borrowed us book, money, later on they have to sell our book. So those of, yeah. So on the day my book is out of the press, and when I'm launching it, I'm smiling because I know all my friends are in the hall and they have to sell my book because their money is attached to it. So this is how it worked. But now, like Kunzang said, we are looking at a small Bhutanese market, and we all know that we will sell 1,000 to 2,000 books. I'm lucky I sold about 5,000 copies. And we are all looking at making money out of it, but, and many did also. But then we are only confined to Bhutanese thing. And with real publishers, we know we will not make that much money, but we have the opportunity of, you know, going international, all those things. And as a child, we always craved, I always heard about rejected by publisher, rejected by too many publishers, but we never went through this. We just skipped, you know, all those. So if we could, Meru, if you could explain to us, what does it mean to be rejected by a publisher? What does it mean to royalty? How does authors get paid? You know, and how do we go international? What's the opportunity for Bhutanese authors?
I think we should start with rejection. Why not? So yeah, publisher rejections are a famous thing. The way it works is people approach publishers through multiple routes. It could be through directly, it could be through something called a slush pile, where all publishing houses will have an email address where anybody can send, and that's otherwise known as the slush pile, which is not a very nice word, but that was what it was called in the terminology. People have literary agents who represent authors for a fee, and then they go to, they represent their work to different editors and try to get the best commercial terms for them. And of course, there are other innovative things like self-publishing or crowd publishing. These are roughly the different ways that it works. You're absolutely right about the 10%, that it is a very, very difficult. People don't know that, and they are quite surprised when they hear it. And it is sometimes quite disappointing for them to hear that. And in terms of your question about how do you make money off books, I would say it's like asking, how do you make money off gambling? I mean, it's because publishing is, I've always said, like gambling. So if a publisher is like a casino, so you have to, all publishers lose money on 90% of their books. And 10% of the books make all the money and pay for the full thing. That's around the world. So is it a sound business model? No, it's an insane business model. It makes no sense at all, but for some reason, this is how it works. So my advice would be that if you want to make money, then this is probably not, this plus gambling plus everything else is, there are easier ways to make money than writing a book. I think it's good to write and want to publish a book for a bunch of reasons. I honestly can't sit here and tell anybody that you should go out in the world and say the reason I want to write a book is only to make money. Because a couple of reasons. That's not going to convince anyone to read a book. It's not a very safe option because, like I said, the success rate is very, very low. And that's how it is. And sometimes it's unpredictable. So sometimes there'll be a book which nothing happens for like 2 years. And 2 years later, suddenly it'll take off. So there's no way of knowing. And that is the role of the publisher, is to sit there and wait and keep pushing it until something happens or not. And then try again and try again and try again. So it's actually a game of patience, For to be a publisher, you have to be sort of like, if you're making movies, 90% of movies in a production house will not work. And they'll work. Some of them will get great reviews. But commercially, only a few will be successful. So I think the first advice I would have is for everyone to be realistic about how publishing works, as opposed to trying to say, this is how we'd like it to be. Because I assure you, all publishers would also like it to be another way. But unfortunately, it's not like that. Because no one actually knows what makes a book work. It's really a mystery. And anyone sits here and says, oh, I know the formula for a bestseller, then I want to talk to that person because I don't think there's a formula. But if I had to say what are the things, consistent features of books which work, I would say the first is authenticity. That people who are writing something truly original and different and really are very passionate about what they're writing about. It doesn't matter if they're not trying to be like somebody else. And writers are quirky and original, and the point of writing a book is to help somebody else see the world in a different way. And if you can do that, that's obviously a very good start. Honesty in writing resonates really well. And what we call the holy grail of marketing in book publishing, what works more than throwing money at something. You can have the best marketing plan, the best everything, and sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes there'll be some, completely unknown author who'll come and nobody will have heard of this person and they'll be selling 50,000 copies. And the one thing which is common to all those books is word of mouth. So publishers call this word of mouth marketing. And to this day, in spite of every technological change, the thing that really, really, really sells book is one person telling another person, you must read this book. So, and really mean it. You know, like you think about all, I mean, I would ask anyone in the audience, what was the last book you read and how did you find it? Most of you will say somebody recommended it to me. As opposed to I saw a huge advertising billboard, or you know, there was like some fancy marketing plan. People want to read it because it's a deeply personal act. So I would say that in terms of money, I would say that should not be the goal. I mean, it's a wonderful bonus if it happens, but realistically, it's just not how it works. And sometimes it takes a really, really long time. In terms of all the other stuff, that passion to make somebody else want to really read a book that you love. Think about all the times you have recommended a book to somebody. You have read it, so you want someone else to have the same experience. That is publishing at its core, finest. So in a market like Bhutan, which is still very small, I would say what you're doing is absolutely amazing because you are doing exactly that. So trying to, I would say, you know, for both of you, a great aim in Bhutan would be to make people aware that books exist and encourage a culture of reading, which you're already doing through this festival. Grow the market. As the market grows, the book sales will grow. So it's never going to be the other way around. That, I mean, actually, I'm wrong. Sometimes it is the other way around. I'll tell you why. Because sometimes a book will capture people's imagination and they'll recommend it to somebody who maybe hasn't read a book before. And that's how you grow a market. So it's a painstaking, artisanal, time-consuming, frustrating task. But it's kind of an art, and you have to just keep doing it, and the market will grow, and slowly. And it does grow slowly anyway. You know, in India, it took a very, very long time for the publishing market to grow to this extent. It was a very, very small market. And over time, more and more people became readers, and that's how the market grows. So I would say it's this, all of this, you'll find over time the market will grow and all of your efforts will really start to pay off. Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Thank you.
Maybe to Aji, I'll shoot some question to you, because I always wanted to know, because you are published with international publishers, and for me also, I know the honor of being published with a publisher rather than self-publishing. Because many people think that people self-publish with others because you cannot afford. It's not like that. There's honor of doing that with a publisher. So I wanted to do my second book with Riyang. I told you for many years, but I'm not ready. I don't know, 20 years now, yet not ready.
You get a rejection letter.
Yes.
No, he hasn't applied.
I've not applied yet. So, you have published your book with international publishers of varying reputation. And looking at the way your book is selling, you should be multimillionaire by now.
Of course.
Yes.
You don't see.
But I also, because I know you personally, I also hear that you are not being, the publishers are not paying you or not updating you. So how do you waste, now you have heard self-publishing stories also, and you are a publisher, you're also Riyang, and now you're doing almost like self-publishing. So how do you weigh a real publishing house across the borders and self-publishing market? And if you can explain the glory, honor of it, yet the other side, downside of it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I'll answer your questions. But before I lose this opportunity, I wanted to point out, which was not while you were introducing Meru, you didn't mention that Meru was the editor for Dr. Karmapinso's book, The History of Bhutan, which is the groundbreaking, the most comprehensive, must-read history of Bhutan. Huh? Word of mouth. Yeah. So this is something. No, but you did the editing, and I think this is a book that should not just be.
It's an amazing book.
Yeah, it's for.
a labor of love.
It is.
Every house should have a copy.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Not for sure, but just really for reading. Okay, Passu, I think...
When you put publishers, they start selling stuff immediately.
Yeah. So your question, I think I came at a time into writing books in English at a time when there was nothing on Bhutan. So there was a curiosity, there was a lack of books. So anyone who dared to come and say that I want to publish a book with you, you know, people, they were interested. They were interested. And it's not that I just gave my manuscript to somebody and somebody said, okay, we'll take it, it's from Bhutan. I got rejection letters, but very nicely worded. very, very nicely worded. It says, our enterprise is not the correct home for your book. Find another home. Okay, so this kind of things you get, and then after a while you begin to, you know, you anticipate it. You send 3, 4 draft manuscripts, and you might just get the standard form. But with my first, the folk tales, I was very fortunate because at the time when I was trying different publishers, and I had tried in South Asia, I had tried in India, I had tried in Nepal, and a publisher in Thailand got interested. So then it was the first time, and you know, going, and when he said, come and see me, maybe we'll publish. I was so nervous, I couldn't sleep for 3, 4 days. And how do you dress to meet your publisher? How do you talk? How do you go? And all these things. You know, there's a lot of anxiety and nervousness. But finally, I mean, we came to a deal, and then he published. It's White Lotus. I don't know if, I think the publishing house may still be there, but I think he's slowing down because of age and things like this. So and then I made the contract. Didn't, you know, I think you have to get a lawyer to read this contract. You don't, they say you should read in between the lines, but how do you read in between the lines? And then, okay, it was not bad. I still have good contact with him, but because he doesn't want to do South Asia, I have to do the marketing myself. And as you know, I don't even know how to send an email on my mobile. I'm so poor, I sent the wrong thing. So I have not been able to advertise or word of mouth, but finally I had to buy back the rights, which was quite expensive, but it was okay. So then my second one, it was also because I think somebody was guiding me. There was something that was telling me to, you know, give your manuscript to this and this person, because I met the publisher at a literary festival in Delhi. And she said, I'll look at your manuscript. And there it took off, because it's a woman's story. And it was a woman's publishing house, Zuban. So, and from Bhutan.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And such a famous publisher.
Yeah, exactly. And her publishing house that started was Kali for Women, yes, which broke up. And so they were really interested in women's stories. So sometimes it's helpful to be a woman. Okay, so she took me on because so that's how it happened. And, you know, then you have to just trust them, and you wait for your 10%. It might be, as you said, it's going to be a long wait. And then I think if they are, what she told me is my book is a steady book, slow and steady. So it has not gone out of print. There's still demand for it. And, but it's not a windfall. I never became a millionaire through that. Okay. Okay. So I just say that I was lucky, because why would, as Meru said, it's very strange, and things just happen the way they hear. Yeah. You know, it just happened that she was, and then from there, I have to be grateful to Urvashi for publishing it and marketing it, and then quite a few translations happened. And the translations, and then talking with people, literary, it makes, even if you don't get the money, the exposure, the wisdom, the experience that you get from people reading your books, critiquing it or reviewing it, that is the biggest reward you get. And I'm still living on the rewards rather than the financial. Okay, so I'm not a millionaire. And before I forget, to continue with the last session, when Michael Rutland asked about how do we deal with nowadays the stress on STEM and AI and the humanities and arts being left out, we just have to look at her.
Yeah.
You know, we have the wonderful example of this lady who's, who's in STEM and space engineer and writing poetry and wants to write books. So I think there's a beautiful blend. And I said, you cannot force these things. These evolve and come out naturally. And she is the embodiment of, the combining the two, what we think are opposing things.
But they're not.
They're not opposed because it's we are behind everything. The humanity and humanness is there, and this is what it is. Yeah. You want to
Yes.
ask more questions? Don't ask more questions.
We are almost time up because I just saw somebody show the 10 minutes placard. Anyway, thank you so much for, portraying me as the embodiment. When I started my journey as a space engineer or when I started publishing my book, I never thought of myself as one thing or the other. I just acknowledged all the feelings and the interest that was, coming out of inside of me, and it just wanted to come out. So the only thing that I guess, since we have a lot of discourse on STEM education, and I am also working in the STEM field and now in the literary field, I think these are just ideas and concepts that are limitations and things that we have created as barriers for ourselves. So my only message here is, don't think of yourself as any entity. For example, if you look at the Earth from space, there's no division, there are no boundaries, there is no difference between a man or a woman, or an Indian or a Bhutanese or an American. We are all one humanity, and we are just here to live and enjoy this very brief moment, this experience, this shared experience that we all have as human beings. So thank you.
I think this morning I met Pubsam. She's also had her manuscript ready, and she was thinking of a title, and she's saying she's sent for. She's like a typical Booknese writer who has finished their work, and they think that it's all their burden to think of a title, proofread it, and then. So that's how you do when you want to do self-publishing. But if you're looking for a publisher, then at about this time, I think you send it to publishers, and you have the right person here. So many of the young authors, if you are looking for a publisher, you do this. But if you're looking, my little understanding, I don't know because the bigger world of publishing. But in all of this, what we were discussing in the speakers lounge, that what we lack is the group of, or the, I don't know, the editors. We don't have good editors here. And our friends think that writers, if you have written one book, or you will be a good editor. No, writers usually are not good editors. Editors are like technical person, I think like that. They have to have eye for all this. They are non-judgmental sort of, because we authors have imaginations, and we want to put our story in there. We want to, so I see there's a very good business opportunity there, those who are very sound in English language or Zonka language, to form a team of editors, so that when we have business, writers want to have some work published, they could pass through you and you can make good money out of it. Just let us know, because I think, couldn't get that so far. And therefore, right now, when young students come to me with their manuscript, I say, please go to your English teacher, because they are the best editor right there. That's how I advise them, because I don't know how to do it.
So, ask me the question. So, are you asking me sort of what an editor does? That's a great question, and it's something very close to my heart. So I'll tell you, because Actually, what I'm doing next in my life, I stopped working at Penguin just 2 days ago, yeah, after 20 years. And my next journey in life is I want to teach people editing. Yes, because there's a few reasons for this. I learned by watching and making some horrible mistakes like you did. And that's part of the learning. But how people like me learned editing is through an apprenticeship. There is no course for editing anywhere in the world, which shocks me. So I wanted to create one. Because I think the world needs editors. But for some reason, the way it used to work is an editor learned by sitting next to another editor. And everybody sat in the office together, and you talked about the books, you learned, you watched the other person, you made your mistakes, and you learned through experience. But one big change which has happened post the pandemic, and as people really work from home a lot more, particularly editors, the next generation of editors is not going to have the same opportunity that I did to learn. Because you're not sitting next to somebody who's going to freely share their knowledge with you. And I would hate for this absolutely essential and amazing skill to be lost. So I want to spend the next 10 years of my career teaching editing. And what it is, if I had to explain what an editor does, they're like sugar in your tea that it dissolves. It just helps it taste good. And you shouldn't be able to see a single, and to use a different analogy, they're like the difference between a fashion designer and a tailor. You want to be a tailor if you're an editor. You want to be the best tailor. So not one stitch shows. You don't want to put your label on it because you have to be invisible. You have to understand that you are there to make somebody else's work shine. It's not about you. And the skill of being able, it's temperamental also. Temperamentally, that person needs to be able to step back and not want to be the center of attention, because the writer must be and should be, because it's their story. So I think what an editor does is they form a partnership with an author. The author entrusts them with their work, and they say, show me the things I can't see. And the editor typically might say something like, I think you've been too kind to this character, and I think you should kill him. Or I think they might say, this person who you're very attached to in your book is coming across as very annoying. Or they might say, this person who you have is amazing, absolutely amazing, I'd love to see more of that. Or they might say, your main character has green eyes in chapter 1 and brown eyes in chapter 2. Very common, by the way. And or they may say that here, your language isn't very clear. So their job is to help a writer make their book the very, very best it can be and then disappear. And it's actually an oddly satisfying thing. I know it sounds weird, but it's very, very satisfying. So that's what an editor does. That's what is known as a structural editor. Structural editors are people who do this kind of big picture editing. After that is done, and there's a lot of back and forth that happens, and at some point after a lot of fighting, crying, everything, and people get very angry, then suddenly everybody will be fine and say, we're very happy now with this manuscript. We're both happy with it. Then the manuscript will go to something called a copy editor. A copy editor is a different type of editor. While a structural editor looks at big picture stuff, a copy editor goes through every single line of the book and says, does this make sense? And so it's a very fine, it's like being a jeweler with a filigree. They look through everything and they say, this sentence doesn't make sense, or you've contradicted yourself, or you've quoted somebody here, so it needs to be in quotation marks. They get the grammar, the typography, all of that is done by the copy editor. And at the very final stage, when after your book copy editing is complete, you know how a book looks, it's set in a certain way. That is done by somebody called a typesetter. And the person who reads the final typeset version of that book is called is called a proofreader, and the proofreader does the final check of everything to make sure it is also. There are all types of editors, all are learned skills, and I honestly think these are some of the most valuable skills because they challenge writers. An editor's job ultimately is to challenge a writer and be their first reader, and they are trying to make a writer, you know, the reader has certain expectations of the writer, and the editor's job is to make sure those expectations are met. So that's kind of what an editor does.
I think for the audience, we don't know how much it has, how much, what message you are taking. But for us, it has been wonderful, especially to have Meru, and to know that you're going to start editing classes. If I was younger, I would jump. But now I have a problem. I cannot see properly, so I would be a bad editor. So you will be based in Delhi, or?
Yes, but I'll do everything online. I want to make
it available
to
okay, anyone. Okay. So okay, and that is wonderful for us to know, because I think here in Bhutan, with our self-publishing and all the things that we are doing, editing is not paid. Or do you pay?
Yes, we try to pay, but
yeah, but even there's something, because I think here most of the time it's a favor from a friend. And then the friends are, because we are a small community, we are a small society where everybody knows everybody, we are very, very, very hesitant to critique. So it's very difficult. So, but if you now learn to edit, and you tell the people, whoever gives you manuscripts, look, we are going to do editing, professionally paid editing, then that will make a big difference. It will already raise the standard. So I think this has been wonderful for us to learn. Yeah, Meru, we are so happy to be.
It's wonderful to hear about everything that you're doing. It's really fantastic. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I hope we going, yes. In fact, when we just talked about it, when we prepared, we said we'll open it up and have a, open discussion about this instead of us, but it just happened the way it happened. So if anyone has questions after this, Passu is there, appointed. He will answer all questions and all advice. Okay, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.